We weren't quite sure what it was we were doing with this in terms of the conversation. So what we did was take those three themes and begin to unpack those three themes in relationship to what we think could be happen over this next period of time. And that first theme around recognition, we just identified, there are hundreds of things that can happen around recognition, but what we did was look at three things. Each of us came up with something that we thought would be relevant to recognition. And one was getting more media coverage and getting people involved in the conversation through some of the social media. So that would be one way that we can start to think about getting this information out, the message out, as Mr. Kurtz talked about on the stage. Because I think the message is the most important thing right now, and that people will act from the message if the message is strong enough. The second thing we thought about was conversations or dialogues in the communities where this conversation is not being had. Creating opportunities and designing conversations in communities that can be in this conversation, because many times we talk about people without the people that we're talking about in the conversation. So it's really if we could design conversations around communities around the nation, or right here in New York City initially, to begin to think about how can they be in that conversation with people in these circles, or with people not in these circles, conversation itself. And then the third thing is Mary talked about communication between groups. In terms of she was talking about at one point, she's retired as a social worker, but when cultural relevance started to come in, that when there was a diversity, that people began to talk to each other because they had to, because they're in the same workspace. And I want to recommend everybody to go and see Hidden Figures, because that can help you begin to understand what the dynamic is around being able to talk with each other, or to be in a place where people have gifts and contributions to make that we don't recognize. And I think our communities have that. It's not all in the intellectual space, that solutions to making this decade a decade that can be memorable. And then we only got to justice. And justice, we talked about this, and I think that our concern is justice is very subjective. And many times, this idea of justice, we need to have conversations around unpacking justice, unpacking what justice means. Because if you think about patriarchally, in terms of what justice means to a patriarch, or from a masculine perspective, then we might be looking at something different when we talk about the moral content, or eye for an eye. What does that mean? So we need to unpack that term, justice. And also, we talked about, I think it was Mary mentioned equal justice under the law, but then we have to talk about who creates the laws, how those laws are represented for humanity. And so those are some of the things that we think that we can start thinking about as it relates to some actions around some of these things.
Let's get right here. This group, what did you talk about?
Well, one of the things that we talked about was taking this back to the community, what we got from speakers. And I work with people who live with HIV. And so one of the real dialogues that we had to have was, where does this disease come from? As traumatizing as it is, one of the things that we have to deal with in our community is complex trauma.
That's okay.
People are traumatized. When a person is traumatized, they can't even give thought to some of these actions and actions that need to take place from a social perspective. Not at all. And so we have to deal with that trauma in order to get them involved. That's one of the things that we talk about.
Thank you, man. Going on to this side.
And I hope I speak to you. I definitely, that's weighing heavy is cross-generational communication, cross-organizational communication. There are so many small grassroots, and that's beautiful because it is the organizational level. However, I think there needs to be I know there needs to be a conversation between organizations, between generations. When I look at what Europeans tend to do, they have one generation come in, and the next generation is able to build off of what they had. and it continues to grow. What I'm saying with our community is one generation here. And the next generation wants to reject everything they did and do their own thing from scratch, and not even give homage to what happened there and start from scratch again. And then the next generation comes in and start from scratch again. We're still here, we're not building up, we're building houses. We need to build up.
This group, anything that you work with?
Yeah, we have many years ago, and we try to come up with ways to promote recognition, justice, and development. And in terms of recognition, one thing that's important is to identify and recognize a broader or fuller spectrum of oppression. For example, some among the oppressed might feel, well, I have more privilege, so I'm in less trouble. But actually, that's part of the spectrum. And, to fully, characterize the spectrum of oppression is important for recognition. And in terms of justice, that it's important to advocate on behalf of the oppressed. Of course, that's obvious, but how do we do it? Well, one way we can do it is to question authorities with hypothetical scenarios. Like, for instance, go to the police station and ask them, well, in this scenario, how would you respond? Right? And get them to really think about it. And then in terms of development, to understand the culture is important, otherwise we can't respond appropriately. So, as my own example, I gave to the cameraman, that, I grew up in Hong Kong, and it didn't occur to me that being a British subject was actually a form of independence. And until I came to America and became naturalized, and then I thought, oh, wow, I have a little more privilege now, but actually, not quite. So, I landed in America at the tail end of the Vietnam War when Asians were not appreciated. So, I guess what I'm getting at is, cultural competence is what really helps development in our case. Thank you.
Any comments or reports back here? Give them a hand anyway. So, I'd like Andrew to come up and Jennifer to come up. They made this event possible. Give them a hand. Any remarks that you want to bring to our attention?
Well, I wanted to say that Najee really was, I think, the first and most important teacher for me about structural racism. And although, I'd always been aware, because I actually was involved with the civil rights movement when I was 13 years old. I had the good fortune to follow with a very special crowd of people. So that has always been a very important part of my identity and my, I don't know, my place in the world. But, a bunch of years ago, Najee and I met, and he really introduced me to a more systematic framework for understanding structural racism and the way in which institutions and all of us participate in perpetuating it. And, and what I've been learning over the last number of years is how important it is for white people to own responsibility for educating ourselves and educating our community. And I guess that also kind of links for me into another idea that I've been working with that really came to mind today, which is about leadership. And that each of us in our own communities and families and institutions, as we begin to become enlightened and educated about these issues, we begin to see it in action every day in our lives. And I think then we have to own responsibility for stepping up and speaking up about what we see. And that's, I think, how change is going to happen. I've been really honored to know Najee and also to have the connections here at the new school and at our Center for Optimal Living, where Jen and I work together, to be able to use our resources to support this effort specifically, but really this broader effort that we're all involved with in more of an ongoing way. You know, there's another idea that I've had that's been stewing. You know, another one of my mentors and teachers is a woman many of you may know, Deborah Smalls. One of the things she says loud and clear is that each of us needs to create conversations in the various spaces that we live in, that we work in, about these issues. And so I've been gestating this idea about starting some kind of a ongoing discussion, conversation, and community at our center about racism, to create a space for people to come together, to learn together, to explore, and to strategize. So today, you know, this meeting sort of has me feeling even more energized about kind of putting some energy into making that happen. I really thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this effort.
I want to echo what Andrew's saying as well. I feel like this is just the beginning. It's been very, very good to just be here, and it's been giving me to work on different things, happen to be thinking about my students differently, clinical work. Then also we have this project on the center that we can even more with, I think. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we primarily come out of the substance use world, and so although the work that we do has much broader application, but I think one of the things we've learned being in the middle of substance use in America is that you can't understand or help people with substance use problems without having a broader social political analysis. And that I think that analysis needs to inform what we do in the room with clients. But again, you know, if you see something, you need to step up and do something about it. And you know, trying to treat people in the context of racism and criminalization around drug use, which I think is a proxy for racism, without addressing the broader social and political conditions, is like a drop in the bucket. So we, as a center, really believe that treatment always needs to somehow be aligned with political advocacy for drug policy reform and an anti-racist agenda.
We also have a committee members, so introduce yourself, committee members. Please come up, all the conference committee members come up. Please come up. You're leaving soon, too. I heard some echoes in the background. They said you don't have to go home, but you don't have to get out of here. So please introduce yourself.
My name is Mwasa Mukian. Not a social worker, but went through the training